The godfather of free trade, Milton Friedman, said, most arguments against the free market are lack of belief in freedom itself. So when we hear big business crying out for market protection from the government, are we listening to a war cry, a challenge to democracy?
The European Commission's Competition Commissioner has launched an investigation into Europe's PayTV services. Commissioner Almunia's team are checking if restrictions faced by Europe's consumers are the result of unfair competition.
Consumers don't seem to be getting a great deal from broadcast companies in terms of their movies. How do you think this could be improved?
Well, I think that the fact that there's a competition issue here and that the Commission are now investigating this is a step in the right direction. People are being discriminated against if they want to choose, say in the UK, a Spanish TV pay service, and they might not be able to access that. So there's so many issues around this.
If you are a subscriber to a service, say in Italy, and you go on holidays in Spain, you should then be able to access the content. And increasingly, with your pay-TV service, you can also see the content through online streaming on the Spanish territory. Despite the fact that you are a subscriber, you may not be allowed to view the content simply because you are on a different territory.
We have a single market in Europe, so you should pay a single charge for the content that you want to buy. And it should be up to you and the person making that movie or selling that TV service to decide what a fair price is.
If you buy a movie online in the UK, you probably can't watch it in France, even if you use the same device. Instead, you'll have to pay again to watch the film you already bought.
At the moment, the pay TV services, which should function quite well, are not across border.
When you buy the movie once, you go to a different country, you got to buy it again. Does that seem fair?
That was the right way of doing business 50 years ago, because then you have to produce the movie let's say to put it in your hands and then bring it to the other side of the world. Now it's just one click on the button and then it's sent to every part of the world via the internet.
I think a lot of people in my constituency would simply be using illegal distributed means of getting access to content because it's simply not tenable to use legal distribution means in the European Union. We have a licensing horror that is being shamelessly exploited by industries.
There are lots of vested interests. I mean, obviously the record companies became multi-billionaires. In the old world, they want the old world to continue for as long as possible. So it's the middlemen who are holding it back, and unfortunately those lobbyists are very, very powerful within the Commission.
These film studios and industrial interests try to subvert this digital single market, and they're also subverting currently a lot of technical standards in a way that I think is actually not conducive to either European entrepreneurial or consumer interests.
Secret negotiations carried out behind closed doors, and the unelected officials at the Commission know what's happening. Representatives for big business, at least on the American side, know what's happening. But me, well, I'm just an elected representative for 500 million people. Nobody would tell me, of course.
We have to ensure, as a European Parliament, as a representatives of the citizens, that there is a real look on what is happening, and if it is necessary to go before court, and there lobbyists will not have to say anything, but the law will be applied as it is.
Some observers believe the problem lies principally with American movie studios. Europe is supposed to have a single market, but the big movie studios often require films to be purchased and viewed exclusively within the same country. The Commission's investigation of the multi-billion-dollar pay-TV sector has been launched right in the middle of trade negotiations between the USA and the EU. There is suspicion that the investigation is politically motivated to gain leverage in the TTIP negotiations.
We're talking about a very sensitive issue in terms of the audiovisual content and TTIP negotiations as well. The timing looks a little bit sensitive, doesn't it?
Well, what really triggered this investigation was the fact that there was a very important judgment by the EU Court of Justice on football, which led us to look at the situation more closely. This is what we have done in 2012. We have tried to look at the situation, and the outcome of this effort is this investigation now. But it's purely a coincidence that there are important trade negotiations going on at this point in time.
For fear of upsetting the Commission, none of the movie studios or pay-TV companies we spoke with were willing to comment for this programme.
The fact that it's the competition authorities that are investigating the pay TV services is important because it's about competitive practices within the EU, and we know at the moment with the court case previously about the lady in the UK, the pub landlord that went to the Court of Justice and won her case, it shows that we need to look at consumer rights and consumer experiences, and at the moment with pay TV it just doesn't look that good.
Most of the time the judges have to change the mind of the politicians. That's bad because it doesn't give a lot of support for politicians. It's a lack of democracy. But at the end, I think the judges in Luxembourg, they will decide on the future of the intellectual property law in Europe.
Well, so one of the positive outcomes of an investigation under the antitrust framework is, of course, that we may see a halt of some of the advancements that the large copyright holders from the United States have been making in whatever technical architectural implementations.
Politicians are afraid of taking decisions which are very important for the future because they all stick on a conservative way of thinking. They want to protect what they get.
It's good that the European Commission is dedicating time to contractual aspects, but they should also be dedicating time to the technological implementations of these contracts and see to it that we don't end up with a lot of technologies in society that aren't conducive to the digital single market, that don't allow us the social and economical freedoms that we find valuable for the European communities.
All of the MEPs we spoke with said this situation is a nonsense in terms of the single market, and all thought this was driven by American television studios who were gaining from unsuspecting European citizens, European consumers. Would that be a fair analysis?
What the court said, interestingly, in the case about football, was that if you have absolute territorial restrictions, then there is basically no competition anymore between broadcasters. This shields them from any competition, and this partitions the single market along national lines.
Consumers have to be at the forefront of what their expectations are and what they get in reality, and at the moment I don't think the single market is working in the way it should be on pay TV services.
I think that the judges in Luxembourg, they will open the market for intellectual property.
Friedman said, "Our minds tell us, and history confirms, that the great threat to freedom is the concentration of power."
They cannot hide themselves behind the wall of legislation which is 70 years old.
Media habits are changing, and we need to have rules and systems that are flexible enough to reflect that.
People's expectations are greater than ever before in terms of accessing information.
The world is changing, and we have to really forecast and to be prepared for the future.
Friedman said that arguments against the free market are a lack of belief in freedom itself. We just didn't expect business to be stopping trade, and we didn't expect government to be opening markets.